Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Aesthetics Decentralized. I'm your host, Jonathan, and today I'm very happy and privileged to have my dear friend Gabriel Harrison from the OAC as a guest. Gabriel,
Hi,
welcome.
everyone.
Uh,
My name is Gabriel. I'm a composer, pianist, vocalist, organist, and bassoonist. I'm based in the New York and Boston area, and I'm also a student of objectivism. And Jonathan and I are together. We're studying in the OAC and Ayn Rand University. I can let you talk more about the objectivism stuff, Jonathan, but I'm happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you. So, first of all, Gabriel, you are a musician. Last time we also had a musician, and this is a subject that I found very fascinating. And the emotional effect that music can have, I can tell from my experience, it is just incredible. I remember when I went to a concert to listen to Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto, I just had this incredible, uplifting, almost I'll call it spiritual moment. So you yourself are working on creating music. So would you like to tell us a little bit about the process that goes into creating a work of music?
Yeah, so I've grown up around music. I started playing piano when I was 6, very young, and I also started composing from a young age. And the reason that I chose that I really wanted to pursue composition is because I have a lot of musical ideas, and I feel that I have a lot to offer as a musician. And so my sort of goal is to make these ideas that I have a reality, and bring them into fruition and help the ideas take the action it takes to make these ideas sort of reach their full potential. And yeah, music is something that, for me, it's almost like a second language, or my first language even, because I've been doing it so long. But I really love music. I have an appreciation for a very wide span of music, several different genres. And yeah, I compose music in a variety of styles. I compose with influences from jazz, classical. Recently, I've been getting more interested in jazz and pop music, whereas my background is more classical. But I compose music for instrumentalists, for piano, and I'm also getting started writing music electronically.
That's very cool. So, would you like to elaborate a bit about what you mean by musical ideas? Because in painting, for example, I'm not sure that we really have a word for that. Ideas for painting? Are you you mean like a background, a specific subject you want to draw? Music is a bit different than that. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I mean, when I have a musical idea, the voice memos app.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have that, and it's something will come to my mind, and I'll be like, oh, I just got this great idea for a composition, or sometimes it'll just be like a little idea, or sometimes it'll be sort of a broad idea for an entire piece, and the structure of a piece, or it'll be sort of a particular measure, or even sometimes just a chord, something that comes to mind. And all of those are things that I when they come to my mind, I'm like, this has something in it. It has a potential to be explored. And so what I would compare it to visually is like, if you you know, I mean, it depends on what sort of painting you're doing, but if you saw a particular landscape, and
Yeah.
maybe um you were like, well, that just gave me an idea for, a type of landscape drawing that I could, what if I combined this landscape with another landscape, or I made this, sort of something's in perspective, and this like line here is going to go across there's going to be a shadow over there. So I would compare it to that. If you have a sort of vision for something,
I see.
when I say musical idea, I mean like theme or something like that. So yeah.
I see. I see. So, okay. So, as a composer, you struck by this idea, and then you just a bit about the creative process, perhaps. What goes into creating a work of music? Because, again, painting is I could see exactly what I could visualize exactly what I want. It's I use colors. I use a brush. I use a lot of different. A variety of different colors. In music, you have a very specific amount of instruments, right?
Mhm.
And there's a it feels to me much more complicated. So could you a bit tell us about the creative process?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to compose music, and different composers have different methodologies, and there's actually an abundance of techniques, and it's really interesting because different styles of music sometimes, sometimes your music, if you use a different composing style, comes out differently. But the way that I compose is actually I sort of generally work beginning to end. So I will sort of go from the start, and I'll have an idea for how I want something to start, and then sometimes I'll have, a second section. I'll be like, I want, when I get to this section, I want it to sound like that. And then I'm trying to connect the two sections together. But a lot of the time I'll just sort of work beginning to end. So for example, right now I'm working on a piano duet, and which means four hands, one piano. It's something that you could sit down at a piano
Oh,
with a friend and play a piece. And so as I'm working on it,
that's
it's
cool.
like I know that I want to have the melody in the left hand here, and I want the secondo, which is the person who's sitting on the left hand, the lower end of the piano. That's the secondo part. And so I know that I want them to have the melody, and then I do that first. And then I go back and I'm like, okay, well, what's the other player going to be doing while that's happening? And I had some ideas for that. So then I sort of fleshed that out, and it's like, they're going to be doing this sort of like counter melody kind of thing. And then after that, it's going to go into a new section, and then the player on the top is going to take the melody. And so I sort of think about that, and I generally work as I go. And sometimes,
Yeah.
there's different aspects to it. Sometimes you're pushing forward and creating new music. Sometimes you're going back and you're like, wait, I have to fix this because what I just wrote kind of sucked, or so
Yeah.
it's kind of a working. But there's other ways to do it too.
So you start, but you don't know how it's going to end, or you have an ending and you don't know how to start it, for example, or you have the whole vision behind it once you sit on the table and write the music.
Um, Generally I have like a very loose idea maybe of what the entire thing will be. Although I personally, as a composer, tend to work more beginning to end, and I sometimes don't really know exactly how it's going to end. And I've had some composition teachers. I studied composition several semesters at Boston University, where I just graduated. And I've had a few teachers who urged me more to sort of think about the whole piece. Before I started, like sort of plan out and map the whole thing. And I tend to not work as much in that approach, although I've sometimes done things like that. Sometimes, particularly with endings, if you have a really sick idea for how you want something to end, you'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to get there eventually, but then what's the in-between spot going to be, kind of?
Yeah, for me, when I'm trying to, I really want to create movies, and I had a very good idea for a movie about 4 years ago, and the only time that I had this good idea for a movie, I just sat down in front of a computer. I had this moment of like, you must know this moment. Yes, I know what I'm going to do. So I sit down, I write the whole thing. It takes me 5 minutes, and then it's ready. But after that, I never got another good idea for a movie, and I have many ideas for how I want to start the thing, but it's much more difficult to know how to end it.
Mhm.
So can relate to that. Um, okay.
Although I will say there's another aspect to composing as well, which is that I my particular mode of operation, and you could say that, for a composer, it's something that's lucky, is that I tend to get a lot of ideas that come to me like inspiration or whatever. But sometimes I don't. I mean, for example, in the last, week and a half, I haven't really come up with any new ideas, but I also still every single day sit down and try to compose at least one new note, of music. And that's something that I maintain pretty much every single day of the week. And I try to keep that really consistent. And that sort of forces me to, it's like, even if I don't really feel particularly inspired, like yesterday, for example, it's like I still sit myself down and I'm like, I'm gonna move forward on this composition. And yesterday, actually, I did a lot of editing and I went back and changed some sections, but I also added some new material. And so there is also an aspect, and I think this is with a lot of art, where, you'll hear visual artists talk about it, composers, all kinds of different artists will say, there is like a sort of sit your butt down and, get it done kind of thing too, where you sort of have to force yourself to output even when you don't necessarily feel
Oh
particularly inspired.
yes, yes. In writing also, there's the thing about writing routine and how important it is to have a routine where you sit down at least for an hour to write whatever you have. If it's not good, you'll delete later, but you have to sit down and write. So I see a similarity there.
Definitely.
So you play the piano, right?
Yes.
Uh, so if you're writing for different instruments, what's the difference there? Because yeah, your whole life you've played the piano. Now you want to write for a violin. What's the difference?
Yeah, so it is definitely challenging. The most experience that I had writing for other instruments was when I took BU's 2 orchestration classes, and that was really challenging because I had to basically you have to do a lot of research. Sometimes you'll look up how does what are the range of this instrument? What's the range of this instrument? What are the different effects that you can get? Like on violin, there's soltasto, and there's all kinds of different pizzicato and things like that. And honestly, I'm still learning how to write for strings because I don't have a lot of familiar with those instruments. But it's really critical, that a good composer know how to write for all the instruments. And also another thing that you do as a composer is you collaborate with musicians. So you write something and then try to know some cellist or try to know violinist, and you sort of show them. You're like, is this something you can play, or is it not that hard? I once wrote something where I was writing these thirds, and it turns out that on violin, there's this particular thing. It's easy to play sometimes, and it's like almost impossible to play other times. These when you have parallel thirds. And
Mhm.
and so I had to have a violinist, and I wrote this piece, and he was sort of telling me, he's like, yeah, you can't really do that. So then I had to go back and kind of change it. So it's sort of a learning process, but the more experience you get writing for other instruments, you start to internalize that. And even though you don't play the instrument yourself, um, you'll still know how to do it. Some composers will actually learn all the instruments, which maybe someday I'll do that, but currently I'm not at that stage.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's try to be a bit more philosophical,
Mhm.
as we are both students of philosophy. Let's talk about what makes music good music and what makes bad music bad music. It's a very difficult question, but perhaps do you have a way to start this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot. Since I was very young, I've had a sort of strong, almost uh, like it almost hits me right away personally. Like I'm like, this is good or this is bad. And and I then sort of go back and I try to figure out why. And the best that I can, in the world of music, I know that that there's certain chords and changes and harmonic techniques and rhythmic techniques like that create. I don't want to get too technical, but they're that make certain things good and bad. But it's definitely one of those things that's um, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what it is.
Mhm. So I can tell from my own experience, there are some classical music which I have a very, natural tendency to gravitate towards. But there are some other works which were initially, when I'm listening to them, I don't like them very much. Once I learn about them, I learn about their background, I learn about the composer's personal story too. I get a certain attachment to the work. But it is as you have indicated, it's a bit personal,
Mhm.
that gravitation towards either side. So could we say that good music has like it has to have like a general principle, but there is no best music. There is not the absolute ideal music, but there's a wide spectrum of good music, and whichever one you prefer, it's up to your own personal, not subjective, personal taste. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I don't know. I've had actually a sort of joke with that I've been like I've always told myself I'm like either uh musical taste is subjective or everybody else is wrong. you know because for me it's I've always had this sort of strange experience of almost like immediately um internalizing music. I'm like, that music is good or that music is bad, and for me it's almost like perceptual. It's almost like, the
Yeah.
sky is blue. It's like I just hear
Okay.
something and it's like, it calls out from across the room. Somebody could be playing it on their laptop, at 30% volume, like on the other side of the lounge or something. And I'd be like, holy crap, what's that music? So for me, that's like how my experience of music is. Personally, you mentioned like sort of appreciating music more after you learn it. And
Yeah.
I definitely see that. And in, like, for example, with movies, I know that like the story of a movie soundtrack, like sometimes I will become attached to music just because of the story behind it. And there's
Mm.
something powerful that it represents, or there was
Yeah.
something moving about this particular time when I first heard it. Like, for example, Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet suite, I went to a concert at the BSO and they were performing it. And I was just thinking about, like the tragedy of that story. And
Mm.
and so there is an aspect of that where it adds to the music. But I also think personally, and I think this is a debate back I'm not super well versed in my music history, but there was a whole debate on like, I think the 1800s about, music for its own sake versus music for the story. And so there were composers who were like,
It's like the split between the romantics and during the romantic period between what was the name of that school? There was the school where Wagner and Liszt, and from the other
yeah,
side, like Mendelssohn
and Brahms, I think.
and Brahms. Yes.
Yeah, right. And I'm singing a piece actually right now by Brahms with a chorus that I'm in. But yeah, so there was that sort of debate, and I personally think that there should be something to the music itself that is where the music itself has value, and then any other value is like added on top of that. Because I have noticed that sometimes when music is in an opera or it's in a movie, it's almost like the music itself isn't really that good, and it sort of is like it's only getting away with its, because it's sort of like, taking goodness from, the story as well. And I, as a musician, I think it's important to have good music and then good
Yeah.
story on top of that, and then good, so like sort of compound that. It's like different components of the
Yeah.
overall piece of art.
Yeah. Different layers that
Yeah.
build upon the quality of the music. Um, so you're less of an opera fan, I suppose.
I am actually not super into opera. I've listened to some opera, but and perhaps I just haven't found the particular opera that's appealed to me. But yeah,
But
I've listened to a variety of opera though, and it's never really super caught my love and attraction.
okay, well, I still haven't gone into opera as well. I think it's a learning curve. Once well, you have started listening to classical music much earlier than I did. So, but it's again, I think there's a learning curve to listening to music.
Mhm.
You can't just start with like Mahler. You have to start with something more more simple, more approachable, because
Mhm.
you'd get scared away if you start with something so complex and so long. Um,
Mhm.
okay,
Well, I
so
personally, maybe this is like a, controversial opinion, but
no,
I
that's
I
good.
don't I I don't really have a lot of respect for you know like the idea that I have to work super hard to appreciate other people's music.
Oh
Like for
no,
example,
no,
like I generally, if somebody is good at writing music, it's generally apparent within, the first, 5 minutes. And not to be, I mean that
right,
I have
right.
had situations where things have started slow and then it sort of picks up and I'm like, okay, now it's really getting somewhere. But there's also an aspect to which, like in the world that's sort of taken over classical music now, there's this sort of idea that like you're supposed to work super, super hard to like force yourself to appreciate certain kinds of music. And this gets even, more so with music that gets like atonal and avant-garde and all that. And I don't really, I write music to sound I like music that sounds good. And I know that that's not a perfectly well-defined term, but that
No, I
is
think
like
it's a
that's what
good
I try to
attitude.
write as a composer, and it's something that I think is important. And I don't, as a composer, I don't really expect people to work super hard to appreciate, I mean, music. I'm trying to write music that, you know, maybe I'll sneak in things that people don't immediately understand, that if they listen to it more, they'll be like, oh my gosh, it's even better, you know, that, or, you know, there's something even more to it, you know, so I'll do that. But I also still want to have, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not intentionally trying to make it difficult for people to appreciate my music when I'm writing as a composer. So
Well, yes, absolutely. But again, this is I'm not a professional composer, but I assume this is incredibly difficult to write such a piece that will be so easily approachable for everyone, but yet so complex and so powerful, like what Beethoven did. But
mm,
it's very difficult. Um, so we, but again, there are more complex, I think, which are for an older taste, perhaps for a more experienced taste, has already listened to all of Beethoven's and all of Tchaikovsky is also very complicated, but they're all very complicated. But I think there's a different level when you are at a different age. You like different things, and I think this is a part of life where
mm,
your taste changes, and perhaps what you like today you wouldn't have as much of a tolerance as you'd have in like 20 or 30 years.
mm,
But the real eternal works of music or general works of art will forever be loved by everyone and by each point of your life. In Greek philosophy, in the Greek tradition, something that has virtue, for example, a virtuous knife is a knife that cuts well, that is very sharp. A good knife is a knife that cuts well. So how should we, if this is the right way of approaching this, what is the purpose of music? What do you think?
the purpose of music.
Yes, what's the purpose of music?
I think I'm not sure if I can answer that directly because I'm not really sure. It's kind of strange what the purpose of music is. I mean, I know that Ayn Rand said, you know, music is the technology of the soul. But I think that what music captures generally, I have thought about this. I think it captures sort of the will to live. Like if I was to sort of to assign all music a certain theme, I think that all music, and I'm talking, you know, pop music to rock music to, you know, classical music to romantic, I think that it captures a certain um version of the will to live, like then, and so something about life and living life and all of the things that that entails, I think, is what's captured in music. And I think that's why music is so universal and yet also so personal, because it's universal because everyone is living and everybody has their own way that they are pursuing the act of living their life, but everybody also has their own unique personal, you know, culture and, you know, methodologies of living life and, you know, way of living and, you know, different food that they eat and, you know, different languages
Different
that they
sense
speak.
of life.
Right, exactly. And so for example, if you take something like Mozart, you know, it's like the culture back in Mozart's time was, you know, they had these sort of ballrooms and, you know, there was the, you know, the wealthy people in their fancy clothes, you know, doing like the sort of, you know, pompous kind of, you know, 1700, you know, 1700s late, like kind of dance stuff. And, you know, and that captures, you know, that, like, that version of life, of, like, you know, the desire to live and, like, and that particular interpretation of it is captured inside of Mozart's music. And so that's something that's really interesting. And then you come to kind of like, you know, I actually appreciate pop music in a similar way that I appreciate classical music, even though it's such a completely different form. But if you come to music like, you know, Michael Jackson or dance music, it's like, you know, when people are dancing, there's something that they're, even if they're just at a party or something, and, you know, they're not really thinking about the music, but there's something about, like, you know, the, like, love of life, you know, and, like, and, you know, it's your body is integrally connected with your mind, you know, and your
Right.
sense of life. And so when you hear that music that's sort of more oriented towards dancing, you know, and there's classical music that's like that as well, then, you know, it's capturing a different aspect of that universal theme of life and the will to live, and, you know, sometimes the struggle to live, you know, and all of that, I think, is so I would say that music generally is to sort of capture that purpose and communicate that, and maybe to remind people, of that theme, like remind people, live your life, do what it takes to, be happy, and you're not going to live forever, and make the best of it. And there's all kinds of interesting themes. And
I think that's very well put, and I agree with much of what you said. Okay, so you enjoy Michael Jackson.
yes, I do. I think we talked about that last
That's
time. Yeah.
right, we did, and what? So there are very very different. Well, I do listen myself sometimes to music from the 70s and 80s and 60s,
Mm,
but this is for a different purpose. I think when I listen to that, for example, when I'm driving sometimes, and I don't want something to, I want to be more, perhaps to get more energy, perhaps to be more awake, perhaps
mm,
I like the beat, um, but I feel like this is something a bit different than classical music. Perhaps I can't exactly put my finger on it. But I also I remember when I was in high school, I really liked Queen, and now I really don't like them. And also the Doors. I was a big The Doors fan, and now when I got into objectivism and all this psychedelic thing, this is not about a love of life, but a love of escape from life.
mm.
Um, so I feel like there's something different here, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to think about it more. Recently, actually, in the last like, month or so, I've actually been listening to more pop music than classical music. I still have an appreciation for both, and it's interesting. I mean, you know, pop music it tends to deliver the entire idea in a shorter period of time. Whereas classical music tends to have more of a, it takes more of an investment to sort of be carried on the journey of it. And pop music definitely appeals more to so that frequently appeals more to, you know, sort of I think the more primitive aspects of human aesthetic appreciation. So for example, like a heavy beat, that's something that I think is a more sort of primitive musical element than, a complex, intertwining of melody and harmony or something like that. And so there tends to be more simplicity. But one of the ways that I conceptualize popular music, and it kind of, I mean, there's a lot of different types of music, and some music, like
Absolutely.
you were saying, some music, like you were saying, does sort of the theme is something about like, I want to escape from life and I don't really want to embrace life. And frequently I will sometimes actually disagree with the themes, like the lyrics of music. Like there's a lot of music that I might rewrite the lyrics. For example, I love the song Vogue by Madonna,
Okay.
which is about like there's a theme on it, but there's aspects in the lyrics that are talking about like sort of escaping from the pain of life, and get up on the dance floor sort of. And it's kind of like the way that I conceptualize some of that is like people sort of misconceptualize people, the lyrics are sort of the people are thinking about something and they're getting at something that's real, but they're getting at it in the wrong way. And but another thing that I was going to say about pop music is that some of the music is like you have a certain feeling when you're listening to it. Like sometimes you're driving, and I have a song that I like to play the what is it? Who Are You by the Who?
Okay.
Who are you? Who
I
who
think I
who
know it.
who? The song, yeah. And whenever I'm driving, I like to play that, and it has this sort of like there's something energizing about it, and one of the ways that I think about pop music is I think about how do like this music makes me feel energetic. It makes me like want to go forward and want to go capture values and do things. And it's like, how do I apply that to my life? Because the way that I think about it is, like if you're doing what you want to be doing in life, you should be going after that with, the desire to like capture it and go after it, with all your full energy. And so part of the theme that I take away when I'm listening to pop music is I sort of extrapolate from that feeling of like, of, feeling motivated, 120% to like go capture values immediately with no hesitation. And then I think of like, well, how does that apply to my life? After I stop listening to this piece of music, what am I going to do in my life to make it worth going after in that way, and working that hard for, and like that sort of thing. And so that's one of the ways that I conceptualize some popular music. And I'm not sure that other people who listen to the music think of it that way, but that's part of the way that I've extracted it. And so it almost kind of is an application of Ayn Rand's theory of aesthetics, because she says that that it's about or at least romantic realism. I mean, maybe I'm kind of mixing it up here a little bit, but she's it's a selective recreation of reality according to a man's value judgments. And so it's like, so if you're creating music that has this kind of energy, and then your idea about life and about philosophy is that that's the kind of energy that you should have in life, and you should be that excited about, choose a line of work that you're that excited about, and find somebody who you love, and if you are interested in romance, and who you're that excited about, and so that is, you can think of, sometimes that's one of the ways that I analyze some of the more popular kinds of music. And I think that then the classical music captures that in a more sort of complex way. It's in a different way. It's like a very, it's longer, and sometimes it's not as long. There's shorter, but it's just it's different ways of capturing the same kind of thing. It's really interesting, and I'm still figuring it out, honestly.
Well, it's a very difficult issue, of course, but I have a feeling that once you have this very upbeat, another one bites the dust, for example.
Yeah.
You have this very funky thing, but the lyrics, but the lyrics are about, another one bites the dust, and I get that now when I'm listening to that, I get disgusted from it, because why are you so upbeat about that another one bites the dust? That's not a positive thing. That's not a benevolent. It doesn't come from a benevolent universe, perhaps. And this is a big difference, I think, from because most of the classical music from the Romantic period, at least, I feel, come from a much more benevolent attitude. For example, in Rachmaninoff's piano concertos, for example, the second one, the good is victorious. I mean, there is a struggle, but something positive comes out of it. And I think this is a thing across all many different artists. And today we have that malevolence embedded into the music, into the culture, not only music, or in all kinds of different arts. So I think this is a big part of it, that malevolent attitude towards life.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think there's a lot of mixed themes. Like, for example, I kind of differentiate music and lyrics, and because actually personally I'm more attracted to the music. So I only started even listening to lyrics, just a little, like maybe a year or two or three ago, but I've always really listened to music, and so sometimes I actually think that the music that is being communicated is not the same as the lyrics, which is kind of, maybe this is because I'm so immersed in music, like as I said, I sort of, music for me is like is another language, but I do think that there are definitely bad themes, that are in music, and that's why actually, I'm interested in getting, I actually want to start composing more pop music myself. And I initially, some people had recommended to me, find somebody to write lyrics for you. And I had sort of thought about it, and I had reached out to a friend, and they'd send me some poems. But I actually decided, I'm not interested in having other people, I've written some poetry, and I can write lyrics, and I think that I want to do it. If I'm gonna write songs for my, I'll write my own lyrics, because it's very important to me that music, that the lyrics, if I'm going to write a song that has words, that it stands for something that I believe in. And that's something that I think is really important. And I've actually even gone back in some of my old lyrics that I've written, and sort of seen some philosophical issues in them. It's a really interesting kind of issue. But I do think, though, that if you listen to just the musical aspect of it, like, I I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know the rest of the lyrics, for that one song, another one bites the dust. But I do know the music,
They
and
are not very positive. I tell you that.
yeah, well, I'm sure they're not. I mean, it sounds kind of like it's like sort of love of domination or something, which is not really a positive
No.
emotion. But you could I don't know. I mean, I don't want to let the composers, of that song get away with it, but if you reconceptualize it as, maybe you don't want to dominate other people, of course. You certainly don't want to, but you do want to, capture values, and you don't want to capture values at the expense of other people, but you do, if it doesn't, you want to go after what you're interested in life, with a sort of, full attitude. And like, what if the thing that's biting the dust is, like the obstacle that's in your way,
Well,
like you overcome an obstacle. And so, I mean,
well, I don't think
maybe I'm interpreting it too abstractly, but
maybe you are. This is,
yeah.
I don't see it there.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know.
and that's another thing when you're looking at a work of art, I think
Mhm.
some leeway, I think, could justifiably be given to the artist. But good art, again, we could come back to the point from
Mhm.
before. I think it has to be perceptual, and if it's unclear,
What do you
or
mean by perceptual?
I mean, once you see it, for example, in painting, then you get, once you look at the I always give this example because it's easy. Once you see the statue of David, then you
Mhm.
immediately get the idea. I don't need to say anything about it. I don't need to tell you anything about Michelangelo. I don't tell you anything about the Renaissance. And you just see it and you get it. So, and again, the thing with lyrics, I think words are something very, very serious. We are a conceptual being, and and the words are capturing concepts, and concepts are well, not words are names that we give to concepts, and this is something very serious, and it has very significant meaning.
Mhm.
I believe. So to downgrade the meaning of words just because I don't know, it goes well with the beat. I think it's flawed
Yeah.
philosophically.
I agree with you. I mean, I've been explaining the sort of positive, the way that I interpret it, but I definitely see it as a, something that detracts from, if a piece of music has really good music, but it has lyrics that stand for something that I don't believe in, then that is definitely, that's a point against, the song as a whole. I mean, it's essentially the way that I'll view it is it's actually philosophically inconsistent because it has like, it has music that has this sort of sense of energy and positivity, and then it has a lyric that is negative and destructive to life. And so I think that music that is actually, fully aligned in, it's philosophically consistent throughout all of its different aspects, and it's not just philosophically consistent but actually standing for something good and valuable. I think that that is definitely important and more valuable as a piece of music. Than something that, has mixed themes. And especially because, one of the things that I've noticed, for me, music is so automatic, but a lot of people really take lyrics of for music that has lyrics, they really take the lyrics seriously. And that's something that always hasn't been as important to me, but realizing how important that is for other people, and like what you said, the fact that we're conceptual, I think that it's very important that music, if especially if you're a composer, you're writing a song, I don't think that you can just sort of write. I think there's something wrong with writing lyrics. I don't know if pop composers do this. It would be interesting to interview somebody like, what's his name, Bruno Mars, who writes sort of like these songs
Oh
about,
yes.
getting girls and like, being, and it's like there's kind of a lack of philosophical content. But yet, I'm sure that he has a lot of good philosophical principles that he had to follow in order to achieve a career. Like, I'm sure that he works very hard, and
Oh
and
yes.
so you get those sort of themes, and it's like, it would be interesting to talk to some of these people and see if they, do they think about their lyrics? Like, how do they think about their lyrics?
Yeah.
Do they actually compose lyrics that they don't believe in, or is it something that they do believe in? And how are they interpreting what they're saying? And but I mean, personally though, I do think that, like what you said, words are for concepts, and and it's important to represent things accurately. Although I will say that there's something abstract and different in the context of lyrics, especially pop lyrics, where I think that words might have more leeway, perhaps, because I mean, you can't really write a pop song with like, complete like, prose
Yeah,
sentence
yeah, I get it.
where all your concepts are perfectly defined. So there is still a more like, it's words being used in a specific context. I mean, it's kind of like poetry in a way. Poetry applies.
Yes, well, there's a story, but
Yeah.
it should be meaningful, I think. And well, yeah, it's interesting. What you said about Bruno Mars, I think it's a very interesting result of living in a mixed economy, of a mixed culture where
Mixed culture, yeah.
yeah.
I will say though, there's another aspect to music too that I've thought about, because I do appreciate some of this music that has, the music, like for example, one of the greatest dance songs of all time, according to some sources, not like objectivist sources or classical music, but is Usher's "Yeah," dun 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 dun
Yeah,
dun dun, dun, that one, yeah,
yeah,
and that whole song, I was listening and watching the video and listening to the lyrics, and the whole song is basically about like is about like flirting with this really super attractive girl in like who turns out to be like your girlfriend's friend or something. So it's like these very like sort of messed up theme and
yeah,
not something that I really agree with. And but for somebody who like, so it's not getting at something that's ultimately, if you are flirting with your girlfriend's friend or something, that's not a thing that is that's generally not something that's beneficial
yeah,
to your life. But what I will say though, and this is something that I started to think about a few years ago, is a lot of these themes are about like what, like money and sex, right? Or money and like and like capturing all the girls and these sort of things that that are what, like the if you're like a gangster, so to speak, these are the things that make you feel good about your life. And I think of it kind of as like a what is correct about the music is that feeling of feeling really good about your life and feeling happy. It's just like it's just they're not realizing what actually makes you like cheating and like and having multiple partners and doing drugs definitely is bad for your life, but also just being obsessed about money and at the expense of other things that are more important and life-giving, or spending money on fancy shoes when you can't really afford it. Those are all things that are actually destructive to your life. And so if you want to actually achieve those kinds of that feeling that's like that is at the core of the music, this feeling of like I'm on top of life and I know what I'm doing, and like I got my
yeah.
stuff together, and that is the sort of positive feeling that I think is being misconceptualized musically and lyrically, through some of these music like rap music and things like that. And also, for a lot of people, and I think this is unfortunate, but for a lot of people, the thing that gives them the greatest sense of life, of all the things that they experience, between their work and everything that they do, I think for some people, the thing that makes them feel the most alive is like things like their romance and love and sex and things like that. And
Mhm.
and I think that's kind of unfortunate, because I think that people should try to pursue work that they love and have other aspects of their life that are just as fulfilling. But so one of the ways that I think about this music, pop music that has these themes about that, is that for some people that's the closest that they can understand to feeling really passionate about life and feeling really like excited about themes about sort of sex and about like capturing attractive girl, and like I don't know, like all those sorts of things are that's the best that people have, that some people have, to connect to a sort of positive life-loving feeling. And so in some ways it is actually, it's appealing to if you put it through the right lens, it's getting at I don't know how to exactly to describe it, but it's like the core feeling of like that I'm living the life that I want, and that I feel in control of my life, and I feel that I'm pursuing the values that I want. Like ultimately that's something that everybody should want, but then this music sort of has a wrong idea about how to get that, I think.
So it is your job to, once you become a successful composer, to introduce to these audiences, these music with these qualities, but it's also about good values, and not only about whim worshipping. But
Right.
I think this is a very interesting point, because I'm trying to think, if we were to live in a totally altruistic culture, totally Kantian culture, these kind of songs wouldn't exist, right? Because it's about self-interest. Getting
Right.
money, getting the girls. It's about self-interest, but
Yeah.
and
So
people like that.
there are positive, like,
Well, it's not really self-interest, but it's not rational self-interest. But
right.
but it is touching, I think, about, you're right, that it has something good in it, and you need to do some proper surgery to extract that good out of it, because it's so mixed up with many negative aspects too. But I think it's very
Right.
interesting.
Well, I think it's
um,
like differentiation, kind of. It's, I mean, I think that this music clearly, I mean, the facts of it is that, it's shorter, it has much broader appeal. And so there's a larger audience that's interested in pop music. And I think that part of the reason that it has such broad appeal is because um, you know, it's not really like, I don't know. I mean, it's not necessarily well developed conceptually. But it's getting at sort of general things, and so it passes by, it it meets the threshold for a lot of people to be interested in it, but then it doesn't really add on to that. I mean, one of the things that I think would be really brilliant is to have pop music that has, really intricate themes that are, really intricate themes about life, that, as you listen to it, you learn more, and think, and you understand, like, the importance and, like, the proper principles more, but it also has that sort of appeal that sort of gets a general audience to listen to it. So it's almost like you can kind of, like, you have something that's like sort of the hook, and then but then you also have, a
yeah,
little bit more substance in it. And then also something that I think is important, and I wish that more pop musicians and other composers did this, is just, you know talking more about their music and the philosophical themes that they're trying to capture, and that sort of thing, and pointing out, like, I didn't really mean this, by this lyric, but I did intend that, and making it clear to their audiences and to the general public, you know what they're standing for, in case it's not clear. Anyway.
well, I think this is a very interesting point. I never thought of it before. um, how would you conceptualize pop music in a totally altruistic culture? How would it look like? Because obviously you can't do these things that are associated with self-interest. So would you sing about sacrificing yourself to your neighbor? It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I, I think honestly, I think there's a lot more sort of altruistic themes in contemporary, avant-garde music and contemporary classical music and all that sort of, this music that is, supposedly coming out of the classical tradition, but but it is, like, painful to listen to. And I think that is a much more, destructive and altruistic. I mean, honestly, if we were to enter, something Soviet, like, I'm reading,
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Soviet culture, but I'm reading We the Living right now. And
Oh.
I was actually researching some of the Soviet national anthems that are mentioned in there and
Mhm.
looking up their lyrics and things like that. And it's,
In,
it's like these,
international, yes.
yeah, and there's these, like, gross lyrics about, like, the proletariat rise up against.
Yeah.
And actually, right now I'm singing a piece in my chorus by Shostakovich, which was
Mm.
written, and it's like, I guess unfortunately he was persuaded or decided to, you know, write music that had these Soviet themes. And it's talking about, it's like nobody, like, I don't, nobody really wants to, sing music about, being the proletariat, like, and we're all gonna get our pitchforks and, stand up, and, like, Red Nation's gonna take over. I don't know. I mean, so I think that we can definitely say that, the pop music of contemporary culture, as as many issues as there may be in the themes and the lyrics, I think is, far different than what would sort of exist if we had, if Kantian, or, Soviet sort of, like you have to sacrifice yourself for, the nation state. I mean, that would ultimately, I think that they would try to suppress pop music. If
Yeah.
such a dictatorship did start to take over, I think that they would try to, and yeah, anyway, so I think that that pop music is something, the pop music that we listen to today is something that could only really come up in a free culture. And I think that the direction for improvement is to, sort of help people who might be misguided by what the music is standing for and what they should do in life, help them sort of reconceptualize what's actually beneficial to their life and how they can actually, pursue the feeling that music gives them. One of the things that's really interesting about music, I was reading, if you go on the Ayn Rand lexicon, if you look up Ayn Rand lexicon music and you read about it, one of the really interesting things that Ayn Rand observed was that music has a different, like, it has a different path from perception to cognition. And I'm basically, with like all other types of music, sorry, all other types of art, like visual art, um, you, I'd have to research exactly what it is. But basically with other types of art, you see it and then you sort of figure out what it is that you're looking at and you start to conceptualize it. And then once you conceptualize it, then you evaluate it, and then you have an emotion that comes from that with other
Mhm.
types of art. Whereas music, you perceive it, and immediately upon perceiving it, it, you feel a certain emotion. And then from that emotion, you then evaluate that emotion, and then you sort of conceptualize the emotion. So music is almost like more directly the tuned into our, our emotional sense. And then after that, it goes to conceptual thinking. And it's really interesting if you research, again, it's Ayn Rand lexicon music, and she talks about sort of and she has some theories about music, but I think it's definitely an area that needs to be innovated more on, because it's really sort of challenging to conceptualize about music. But it's interesting, just though, that emotion sort of comes first. And so there is something interesting about this pop music in that, it creates, what at the root of all that, another one bites the dust, like dominating other people, and, having multiple sex partners and all these things that are not necessarily beneficial to your life. But the root of it is that the people who that really appeals to, have sort of a wrong conceptualization. But the core of it is that, they want to sort of feel, in control about life, and, and positive, and, they want to love their life, and those are all positive things that are at the root of it. And that's like what if music does directly stimulate, emotions, or arouse emotion first, then that's actually what's coming up first, and then the other things are coming from that. I don't know, it's
It,
an
it
interesting
definitely is.
topic. I wonder if I could pick it up right now, but anyway.
Well, it's a very, very different, again, difficult, but it's very interesting. I will also refer the viewers to the episode with Nicholas Krusek, where we also discussed about how to really analyze music, and he said something like it. Ayn Rand said that it requires a musicologist, a neuroscientist, and you remember what's the third profession, in order
I'm not sure.
to come with a coherent theory of how to anyway. So
Where did she say that, out of curiosity? I'm not sure I read
I
that.
think it's from psychoepistemology of art, but I'm not certain. um or well, from the chapter from Romantic Manifesto, where she talks about maybe art and cognition, I think
Okay. Okay.
would be a safe bet.
I don't
um
remember that, but I think I've read that chapter. Um, but anyway.
well it's a complex issue. So okay, so I think the idea of well, we want to change the culture. The end goal is that, I think, for me and for other objectivist activists and other people who are active in that, whether we are artists or philosophers or
Myself as
uh,
well, definitely.
so I think the change is really about, first of all, it's about philosophy, but music is an essential part of it, and art in general. Once we have better art, I'm sure we will live in a better world, but where people could appreciate also good art, and perhaps they will appreciate better art in a better way once they have the right uh, approach to how to look at life, and how to look at life, how to look at reality, um, and a proper approach to ethics. So this is a whole complete, we need a whole complete package. And I remember this when I was at a freedom conference in Israel. um, Met many pro free market libertarian like people, and they think the change could somehow come from politics, and I think this is wrong. You cannot change the culture through politics. People really need to understand. They really need to understand how to live right, how to think properly, um, and this requires a holistic understanding of philosophy. And art, I think, is a much safer bet than politics, in my opinion. If you have better art, it is, well, of course, if you like have an objectivist party and they win, like, but they won't win because nobody will vote for them.
Well,
So
I mentioned that at one point, and I think something that Onkar or Ben might have mentioned was, you know, if you focus on changing the culture and changing the philosophy of the culture, politicians ultimately just conform to what the general population wants. And so you don't even really need to introduce a third party. It's like if you start to get the general population to adopt your right principles, the Democratic and Republican Party they sort of just flow, they're not really attached to principles. They will just sort of go with what the culture, says. And that's why I think that there is validity to the idea that, that you need to, focus on the culture and the philosophy of the culture. And a really great way to do that is to partner sort of with partner, so to speak. I don't know if that's not the right term, but but art is a really important aspect of how
yeah,
people
and it shows
take in new
you,
ideas.
it shows you how people think about life. If they like to listen to songs about drugs and about alcohol, then it says a lot about them, I think, and a lot about where they live. um, so your work in this profession is like it's one of the most important jobs, I think, if this is indeed our goal. I think, well, the most important goal is to do what you love and to be happy and pursue values. But again, this is, I think, a very big part of it too.
Well, just take Ayn Rand, for example. I mean, Ayn Rand I would say she was principally an artist. You know,
Mhm.
how do people get into objectivism? Like, I would say 90+% of them start by reading her fiction. That was certainly the case for myself. And so it's like, if you really want to reach an audience, you present an artistic product, and then you can sort of have the political ideas behind that. I mean, I think there's validity to, you were talking about libertarians who want to affect the politics, and that's definitely very important, because I was associated with a libertarian group, Hazlitt Coalition, that was, they were doing some serious work to try to get libertarian candidates elected, which I think is a important thing to be working on. But but ultimately, it's important to the extent that, we need to make sure that there's at least enough freedom that maintains alive for us to at least be able to
Yeah.
continue the effort to change the culture. But in terms of a long range solution, the long range is that we need to change the philosophy and we need to change the culture. And that is ultimately what will have the really lasting effect. And politics is kind of just, the people who are working in politics now, it's like, can we just stave off totalitarianism for, for enough time for the artists and philosophers, for us to get our shit together and start actually, actually making an impact and getting people to like start rejecting their horrible ideas about politics and about philosophy and about life and, all those things, can we sort of stave off totalitarianism long enough that we, don't get imprisoned and then
Yeah.
actually start to, like establish a government. And another thing is, like things are actually, right now, despite all the problems, at least in America where I am, um, things are, things are very free and very good. And this is the ideal environment for us artists and philosophers. Freedom of speech is strong in this country. And it's the ideal environment for us to make a lot of progress in trying to change the culture. Because it's not necessarily true. If things do sort of continue on a sort of down, slow sort of downward, fall, then eventually it might not be as easy as it is now to spread ideas and to say what you think and to really change the culture. So I do think that, it's important to not take it for granted. But it's also important to realize that, despite all the people saying that everything's, super horrible, terrible, America is still generally a very free country, and we have the freedom to, do lots of good things. So I'm not sure why I said that.
No, I think this is good.
Yeah.
I think this is a very positive note, and to end. And I would only add that it's important, also very important, what you said much earlier about good music helps you to go and pursue life in a very, very very condensed and powerful level of passion. It's about passion to live. And I think the what our viewers hopefully will get from this episode is that they will go and listen to if you have a specific playlist, by the way, if you have recommendations, read it from the episode before, then feel free to provide us, to put in the description. Not compulsory, but listeners, go and listen to some good music. So be happy, live a good life. This is not only about changing the culture, it's about living your own life to the best of your ability. And music is a huge tool that will help you to achieve that. And I think this is very...
even just take your favorite song. I mean, take something that you already know, is something that is meaningful to you, whether it's a pop song or a classical song or something, and go and listen to it and think about, take it one step beyond just sort of, sitting back with the headphones and, or going on a run or something, but like maybe just go for a walk or go for a run or whatever you want to do. But then think also about, like, why does this music make me excited? Am I as excited about, if I was to take this music away, are the other things in my life as exciting as this music? And can I make them as exciting? Or, are there things that I should be pursuing with passion that I'm not? And can I use this music to sort of help remind me of the way that I need to go after the other goals and things that I value in life? What's important to you? How are you going about doing it? Are you putting your all into it? Are you putting the passion that your favorite, song that's exciting or something? Are you putting that much passion that singer and that song, that the composer put into that song? Are you putting that much energy into your own life? It's like think about those kinds of things. I think it's an interesting way to appreciate both, well, I'm talking more about about popular music, but also classical music as well. But I think you can start, just with a song that you already know, and then you can start to explore other kinds of music as well and think about what that music stands for philosophically. What kind of life would it look like, if that music was the soundtrack, for example. I listen to a lot of soundtrack music too, and it's interesting because soundtrack music is sort of designed to be put underneath, a picture, like a movie. But I also think that because of that, it has a universality in it that's interesting and different than other kinds of music as well. Anyway.
Well, this has been very interesting, Gabriel. And please tell the viewers where they can find your content, because I know that you're working on some very exciting things.
Yes, I'm just getting started with everything, but my website is gabrielmusicmaker.com.
Link in the description.
Yeah, link in the description, and also my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Gabriel Music Maker, and we'll also link to that. And you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Gabriel Music Maker. And I'm setting up the other social medias, but they're not, but they're not yet set up. But that's a great place to start. Yeah. And
Okay.
I post performances that I'm performing in, and you know, original compositions that I'm writing, and I'm just getting started. So I'm very excited to share. If you're interested in other things that I'm doing, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow the Facebook page or anything else like that. If you're interested.
I don't say feel free. Go and do it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe I need to get more on the promotional side of things, but yeah,
yeah, you need a
I say
call to action. You viewers, go and subscribe to Gabriel. You would really thank me for that, and thank Gabriel.
I know, but the thing is like, what if people are oversubscribing? You know, if people actually subscribe to every YouTube channel, I don't know. It's like then they're not even going to pay attention to the YouTube notifications because they're going to be getting, I don't know. So it's like, so I say subscribe if you actually want to, you know, or you should not subscribe for something unless you're actually interested in getting like your phone pinged, whatever. Anyway, I'm over analyzing this. I'm new to YouTube, so maybe I haven't learned, like, you know, I need to just like sell my soul in terms of
you need to sell everyone to subscribe to Gabriel at once. Okay.
No, I'm not gonna sell it, but yeah, promotion is good though. Anyway,
I think we've done some good promotion. Okay, okay. Gabriel, thank you so much for this episode. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun. I hope that the listeners, if you're still listening, got some good value from everything that we talked about and all that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And please subscribe to this channel too, if you haven't yet. And give us a like or a comment. Let us know what you think. Okay, so thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode.